Looking at that number increase so we make sure we have everyone. Great. Well, welcome everyone. This is ANC 1B's ZPD Committee Meeting. It is Monday, May 18th around 6:34 p.m. And my name is Amanda Farnan. I'm the admin consultant with ANC 1B. And I've put in a link for tonight's agenda in the chat. I've also put in a description on instructions on how to ask your Q&As and make sure, or sorry, how to ask your questions and then get the A's and make sure that you are in line for when we get to the agenda item other business. Please, if you did submit a question in advance, thank you so much. Just make sure to resubmit into this Q&A function so I hold your spot in line. And now I'll kick it over to Patrick and he will kick off the meeting officially.
Okay, everyone, as Anita or Amanda has noted, this is the May meeting of the ANC 1B Zoning Preservation and Development Committee. Today is Monday, May 18th, and I am the current chair of this committee. We will start off our meeting today by going around and introducing the committee members. So I'll ask the committee members to announce themselves and where they're located in the SMD or in the ANC region, as we normally do in our meeting. I'll start with Clark, except that I think she's muted.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm Clark Flint. I'm in ANC 1B09, so Fairmont and 13th, more or less.
Hi, I'm Bill Smith. I'm ANC 1B12, 13th and T Street.
We'll go to Brad.
Hi, Brad Grant. I'm with Howard University.
And Melanie.
ANC 1B06, Columbia Heights.
And Joel.
Joel Heisey, LaJoy Park.
Awesome. Tony, are you on? I think he's on. He just might not be able to speak, but he is here.
And then Anita? Tony Norman lives up in Howard University. Right. So we also have the team that will be making the presentation, which will be the developer himself, Christopher, architect, Emily, and Ron. And then the legal part is Marty Sullivan. So tonight we are here to review and discuss a project that the ANC needs to weigh in on, located at 421 Key Street in an RF1 zone. They're going in front of HPRB for concept review and design. And then they're going in front of BZA for special exceptions from the residential conversion requirements, variances from the residential conversion requirements, height limitations, convert the existing dwelling into an 11-unit apartment. So I will turn it over to whomever is going to make the presentation at this point.
So can everyone hear me first off?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my name is Chris Gorser. I'm with New World Developers, as Patrick said, the property owner at 421 T Street. I'm going to pass for being here tonight. We're presenting the project and answering some of the questions that the community has. And as a member of ANC 1B, it's exciting for us to be able to talk about development in a community that we live in. So Emily, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you to start the architectural presentation.
Great, thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Emily Rotman. I'm at Square 134 Architects, and I'm going to share my screen to present 421 T Street. So just want to confirm, can everyone see the presentation? Okay, great. So let me get this into full screen. If I can find you, there we go. Okay, so this is 421 T Street. It was originally designed by James McGill. It's in the Victorian style and it was built in 1876. The property is located in LeDroit Park's historic district, and it's on T Street between 4th and 5th Street Northwest. Zoning is going to be covered by our land use attorney in more detail later, but just as a brief overview, we are proposing a 29-foot addition, increasing the lot occupancy from approximately 27% to 42%, maintaining a proposed rear yard of 47 feet, and that the side yards will be matching the existing side yards of the property. For the existing building, we're interested in maintaining the character of the existing facades. And we were also really drawn to the asymmetry of the building, the geometrical ornamentation, and the variety and playfulness in both the bay projections and dormers. For the proposed the select addition and I guess changes to the existing building were very intentional. We're interested in removing the one-story addition along the west facade. If any, window changes were limited to the east facade because the majority of that facade is covered over by the adjacent neighbor. And the rear addition will only take place in an area where there aren't any windows, so that we wouldn't be doing anything to impact the original character of the exterior building. We also met with HPO prior to doing any design changes to the building, and have really been working with them diligently to come up with the design that we've developed. And this is also wanting to take forms from the existing building and replicating them in a more modern interpretation. And again, really emphasizing the playfulness and ornamentation by providing bay projections and dormered windows. We also are really interested in using simple materials and forms to create a difference between the original facade and the proposed addition. And that we wanted to use materials that were similar in proportion to relate to the existing structure. And we also were interested in providing some form of a transitional space between the original structure and the proposed addition. For the site plan, we really do want to make sure the building still feels like an icon within the landscape. And one way we're looking at doing this is by using green pavers. So that way, an area, especially for parking, typically would have more of a grassy feel, and that landscape can still be maintained. We also were interested, as our proposed design was to take the original massing and develop a courtyard where we could mirror or flip that projection to create that our new design between the two. So the intent is for the courtyard space to really be a transition space between the original building and the proposed addition. Also, we were interested in carrying over the prominent roof forms from the original structure to make sure that there was proportionality and alignment with the original structure. But we did want to make sure that the addition is lower in height than the original structure to maintain deference to that original building. For the materials, we are interested in using modern materials that are in similar proportion to relate to the original building, but yet still distinguish the addition from the original building. And as you can see from the sections with our proposed addition, that we still have a large rear yard provided to the property line. The addition, thankfully, is well hidden within the center of the block. And there is a significant distance between the rear facade of our proposed addition and the rear facade of the neighbors along U Street. And to emphasize, this design, we've worked with historic preservation quite a bit to develop the massing and proportions to be where they're at. And to remind you, I guess the key elements that we were interested in maintaining from the original building and the addition is that we wanted to carry the roof plane across between the original building and the additions, break up the massing by providing dormers and bay projections, and really emphasize the asymmetry of the original building with the changes to the addition. And some of the key elements that we also wanted to note, we are intending to extend the porch back to its original length or distance. We're also looking to restore this original balcony. We plan to keep both chimneys in place for the design. And by removing that one-story addition, we were able to restore symmetry within this elevation as well for the windows. And in terms of the height, again, just to sort of note, I know it's higher than what's allowed for maximum height in terms of the zoning criteria, but we again wanted to make sure the addition is still lower than the original structure. And a key element of why we ended up with the height with where we're at is really the constructability of the building. The existing building has 2 different heights for the 2nd floor and 3rd floor already within the design. And we purposefully picked the lower elevations for the 2nd floor and 3rd floor, so that way we could maintain the original heights of the structure, but still have it be that the addition is lower in height. We also, in terms of demolition, are maintaining 89% of the original joists and 70% of the original walls, which can be noted in the demolition plans. And for the proposed design, we're looking to have a total of 11 units. All of the units are going to be 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units. And the majority of the neighboring properties are around 2-bedroom units that are close to 1,300 square feet. And the proposed units within this project are in line with what's comparable to the neighborhood. We're also providing a number of amenities, including a bike room and amenity space on the cellar level, and also providing, again, a common deck courtyard area in between the proposed addition and original structure. And this is just quickly going through the plans. So for the shadow studies, I would like to first point out that the first set of shadow studies are comparing the proposed height in comparison to what's allowed matter of right for the 35 feet. And you'll note in these areas where there's slight overlap that the proposed height of additional shadow from the 35 feet to the proposed height is pretty minimal. I would like to note that there are going to be shadows for the neighbors along 5th Street in the mornings. And in the winter time, there will be shadows to the rear yards of the units that are along U Street. But in terms of the increased shadow, the majority of shadows are just within the alley or within the rear yards of the property. And just something to keep as a comparison in consideration, if we proposed a structure at 60% lot occupancy and 35%, I'm sorry, not 35%, 35 feet in height, the amount of additional shadow that would be cast would be significantly more than what we're currently showing. And with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Marty Sullivan to go over the zoning.
Hit me again. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, let me share my screen here. Okay, does everyone have that?
Yep.
Okay, so my name is Marty Sullivan. I'm zoning counsel for the applicant, and I want to go over the BZA relief that we're requesting. First of all, there's only the only matter of right option for the building is a single family dwelling or a 2-unit flat. Anything beyond 2 units requires some form of BZA relief. The first area of relief that we're asking for is a special exception under U 320.2. This is the special exception that allows us to convert an existing residential building into a multiple dwelling. And there's some conditions that the BZA is going to look at to approve the special exception. These are the key conditions here. First is inclusionary zoning. The 4th dwelling unit and every even numbered unit after that is subject to the requirements of inclusionary zoning. And this relief was adopted in 2015 before the new regs came in, when they changed the old R4 regs. Originally, this would have been matter of right to 6 units and anything in the RF zone, previously the R4 zone. You could convert to multiple dwelling units per the 900-foot rule. So you could realize 1 unit for every 900 square feet of lot area that you had, and that was matter of right. So that was scaled back significantly in 2015, and they made it a special exception to go beyond 2. They did keep the 900-foot rule. I'll note, I have this later in the presentation as well, but regarding that inclusionary zoning requirement, after 60+ cases since they've instituted this relief, we have found it has led to 1 inclusionary zoning unit. There have only been 2 applications that have gone beyond 3 units. One of those was fairly recently, it was denied, and the other one was 5 units. So 1 IZ unit has been approved in 5 years, and we're proposing 4 here. So the 900-foot rule provides 1 unit for every 900 square feet. We could get 8 under this right now, and the next area of relief we're asking for is a variance, and I'll talk about that, a variance from this 900-foot rule. The other key condition is light and air and privacy. The board will evaluate the addition and determine whether or not it substantially adversely affects neighboring properties as to light and air and privacy. So the variance, so we have 1 special exception so far, and the area variance from the 900-foot rule is essentially asking to go from 8 units to 11 units. This allows us to provide 4 inclusionary zoning units, and the issue behind this, or the unique condition behind this, we have an exceptionally large property and an exceptionally large and important building to preserve. And it becomes difficult to preserve a building like this and work with it and to develop it the way it should be developed. We expect that the Historic Preservation Review Board will support an addition of about 40%. We're asking for 41% right now. And with an addition of that size and all of the design requirements and all the difficulties in restoring a building that's been somewhat neglected, it becomes very important to optimize what the market's demanding in terms of unit size and number of units. And that's why the developer believes that 11 is the right number for that. And it allows the project to be successful, and allows us to provide 11 new units for the community, including 4 IZ units. And it also ensures the adaptive reuse of the building and ensures its longevity and sustainability. The next area variance is from height, and Emily spoke about the need for this. You see the matter of right height is 35 feet, special exception is 40. We're asking for a little over a foot over that, 1.5 inches over the 40-foot special exception height limit. And the existing height of the building is 46, 4.5. You saw from the section that Emily provided that the main reason for this is we're matching the floors. And with matching the floors, the ceiling height in the addition is not exceptional. And so we kept it as low as we could, actually. And so that's why we're requesting the additional foot. I'd like to point out some of the benefits and positives of the application, which the relief provides. Again, it's the 4 IZ units, which would quadruple the number of IZ units ever approved under U320. I know the Zoning Commission member of the BZA panel, they often get frustrated that nobody applies for that 4th unit. And it doesn't usually work out economically to do that. And so this is, I think they'll find this to be an extraordinary case, and they'll be excited about the inclusionary zoning opportunity here. Also provides 11 new housing units, allows us to restore the building, ensure the longevity of the building. And again, the footprint's limited to 41.6%. You'll notice most of the other buildings on the block are probably over 60, and 60 is what's permitted. We do have 5 compliant parking spaces. I will point out one of the letters in the file filed by a neighbor was correct in pointing out that we don't have the 50% reduction available to us. But the requirement is 5 spaces then, it's not 3. And the reason why it's 5 is because we're subject to providing parking for the amount of the addition. Since it's currently a single family residential building and has a parking requirement of 1, what we're providing would have a requirement of 6. So we're required to provide 5 spaces. Also then note another positive, of course, that in the end, HPRB is going to approve the design, the appearance, and the compatibility of this. So that's all I have. Chris, do you have anything else to add?
All right, I'll chime in. I think, thank you, Emily. Thank you, Marty. From our perspective, the development side of it, being a member of ANC 1B and just knowing some of the changes that have happened in areas like U Street and 14th Street, Shaw, and LaDroit Park, the ability to create affordable housing units and mixed income properties is extremely challenging for a lot of reasons outside of just pure economics. And so the development team and those who are involved in this project were really excited about the opportunity to create affordable units on a block of LaDroit Park that otherwise individuals wouldn't be able to afford. It's pretty well known some of the prices for the existing row houses are well over $1 million. And so to be able to provide 4 of these units, and again, they'd be permanent units, they wouldn't be subject to expiring or changing at a time where LaDroit Park has all of the amenities that any resident could ever want. So we are really excited about being able to do that, providing that level of affordability, and also obviously bringing back a really lovely property in 421. And so that's what we've been aiming to do for several months now. And we're glad we have the opportunity to share that with you to get some feedback. Thanks.
Okay, so Amanda, can you mark Tony Norman as a committee member and then give him a second to introduce himself before we go further?
Yes. So I think, Tony, you are off mute if you just want to say hello and what area of 1B you live in.
Yeah, Tony Norman. I'm in, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. I'm in the northern part of the university, 1B10, north of the university at Gresham and George Avenue.
Thank you.
A little bit of echo there.
Little echo action, but that's okay. We got it.
Okay, so let's now turn over to committee members that have questions that they want to address directly to the team. And I'll let whoever wants to go first go first.
somebody else go and ask theirs first.
Yeah, and Amanda, I would suggest that you unmute all of the committee members since it's just a small group, and whoever is speaking will be able to speak so that we don't have to worry about trying to figure out who wants to speak next.
Great.
I do have a question. The IZ, with the 8 units, how many of those units would have been IZ?
3.
3.
Number 4.
3,
number
but
3.
it's likely that if we were at 8 units, because the 8th unit is an IZ, it's more likely that it would be 7 units. So that would be 2 units. So
wait a minute. It's 8 units and 3 of them would be IZ.
3 of them would be IZ if 8 units were provided. But because that 8th unit is an IZ unit, it's not, so that it would be more feasible to just do 7 units if we were restricted to 8 units.
And with 7 units, how many would be IZ?
That would be 2.
And what affordability percentage are you looking for the IZ?
These units would be at the, you want to take that, Marty?
Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
So these units would be at the 60%, so as low as individuals making about $40,000 to $45,000 a year, up to about $60,000 a year, to give you a range there.
Then 2 additional questions. I think I wasn't clear on the entry sequence. How do you enter these units, from either the street or from the parking, from the back alley parking?
I'll share my screen again to answer that question. So the entrance from the street will remain intact. At the first floor, there is a hallway that goes all the way from the front to the rear of the property. And in the center is where we're sort of envisioning that to be the hub. That's where the mailboxes and lockers will be located. Because this is a historic district, we can't provide accessibility from the front. So we are making sure to include a platform lift at the rear of the building to then come up to be in line with the first floor elevation.
I see. Okay, thanks.
Emily, could you, this is Melanie from 1B06. Could you, while you have this up, could you show us both where trash will be stored and where it will be brought out for collection? And then I'd like to take another look at the shadow studies.
Yeah. So we are proposing that trash be stored behind the parking in the rear area. You would access it through the same drive aisle that's separating the accessible parking space from the remaining parking spaces. And all access would be through the alley.
And how is that separated from the opposing street?
I'm sorry?
This is Joel. How is it separated from the opposing street or the opposing property?
This part here is someone's rear yard. This isn't a street.
Okay, so this backs up to the property on Elm Street.
This is U Street.
U Street.
These are the rear lots of U Street. So I can zoom in here. The site is these 3 lots, and there's an alley that connects to 4th Street, and through that alley comes in this way. So for the access so here's the alley and where it kind of jogs to that L shape, and you would enter from the alley into the parking area here. Trash would just be stored here.
So let me piggyback on that question, because that's an important question that seems to be in need of answer. The alleyway is not a wide alley. So this building, if it's done the way you're proposing it, is not going to be serviced by the District of Columbia. How have you looked into how those trash is going to be picked up? Because if it's picked up by a regular non-district truck, it's going to be a much bigger truck, which will not be able to come in through the alley. So then you're going to have to figure out how it's going to be brought out, and I'm assuming you're going to be using roll-off cans.
Yeah, Chris, do you want to answer that in more detail?
Correct, yes. We have Tenleytown Trash as the trash operator for the property, and they actually help with the design of the rollaway bins, including recycling, as well as the size of the dumpster as well, to be able to get in alleys that are actually smaller than this in the district as well.
So you're saying that they have a truck that can fit in the alley? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
And that's true for waste as well as recycling?
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm just going to make a quick suggestion while I'm thinking about it, Chris. I think that it's important that if this does go through and it gets in front of the BZA, that you need to have some kind of documentation from the trash people that states that, because it is going to be an issue that the community is going to bring up. So if that's the answer to the question that you're having, you need to get something directly from the company that says you are committed to going with that company, and that they can show and prove that they have a truck that will be servicing your property and can access that out.
So after I can provide the actual quote that we received for the dumpsters and the rate that it would cost to service the trash for the property, and I can provide that after the meeting, present that as well. So.
Patrick, I had a sort of similar question. What kind of documentation could Christopher provide to show that the units, the IZ units, will be at 60%? You know, I'm very excited to hear that, but I also want to see where there's a commitment to that level. Is there anything you could bring? Yeah.
Hear me?
Yeah, that's in the zoning. So it says that those units that are in the RF1 zone, that RIZ, are at the 60% level.
Got it.
So that's in the zoning code. So that's locked in.
Got it.
The answer to that question is, like you said, in the zoning regulations. If it's a rental unit, it can be at 1%, a specific percentage, and if it's a for sale unit, it's at another. So if it's at 60, it's at, I believe it's a for sale unit. Is that correct, Chris?
For sale, can be as low as 80. For rental, it's 60%.
Okay, I was not sure. I knew one was one, where was the other? So it's the rental unit. So we know that these are going to be rentals, not owners.
This is Tony.
Correct.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Back on how many affordable units were you offering?
4.
At 50%?
60.
Oh, 4 at 60%.
Yeah, 60.
A total of 11. Out of the 11, I'm sorry.
That's correct. So the IZ would represent almost 40% of the units in the property.
And did you all address the concerns of the residents? I came in a little late.
We haven't gotten there yet.
We haven't gotten to that yet, Tony. This is just the committee members and the development team talking. And once we're done with this, we're going to open it up and allow anyone from the community to address questions directly to them.
Yeah, I have one other follow-up question. What was it previous? Was it a single family house or a 3-unit before, or what is it presently being operated?
The single family house.
It's presently a single family house?
Correct.
But it was converted into 3 units.
Was it being treated as 3 units or just simply?
So there's no certificate of occupancies for the 3 units. The basement has some renovation to it, but for all intents and purposes, it is a single family house.
How many parkings did it presently have?
Right now, the rear alley with the property has space for 3 or 4 small cars.
All right.
Did you have any other questions, Tony? Because I'd love to ask about the shadow study a little more.
That's it for me now.
Okay. So could we look in a little more detail, Emily, at the shadow study, particularly how it affects the property at 417 T Street, please? I think Emily's on mute. Could someone help her out?
Unmute it. Okay,
Am
go
I
ahead.
unmuted now? I'm sorry about that. Okay, so 417 T Street is the neighboring property, and the addition is not until after their property ends and is really in the alleyway. I think it only overlaps with about 3 feet. So the shadow studies, at least from what we saw, were pretty minimal to what's actually already occurring on 417 itself. You can note that the majority of the increase in shadow is actually just within the alleyway.
Can you just run your cursor along the line of the rear property line for 417?
It is this line right here.
Thank you. And at that line, is that parking? What is happening in that? That's yard?
So this is the L shape of that alleyway. So the
Right.
alleyway turns at that point. So the alley comes down here, and then this is still all alleyway.
Got it. Are people parking in that alley?
In the L-shaped portion, I don't believe so. I believe most parking is just on the property itself for anyone off the alleyway. There is, if I can go back to the site plan real quick. There are a few alley structures, or like this is technically a rear alley lot in this area, but I don't believe there's any parking in the L-shaped portion of the alley.
Okay. For the shadow study for December for 417L, could you show us that one again too? And I'm sorry, I think someone else was trying to pipe up.
I just wanted to say to Melanie that the 417 owners have a parking lot on their rear of their house that they use to park. So I think that's part of what you were trying to get at.
Yeah.
There are spots that are made in the backyards for people to park, but no one's allowed to park in the alley.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Am I off mute? Good.
Yes, you're off mute.
Thank you. So this is for the winter studies. Here are the existing shadow studies, and then here with the proposed addition. Anywhere that's outlined in red is where the additional shadow is being cast outside of what's already being cast from the addition. The red shows what's being cast from the proposed addition in comparison to what was already cast before any addition. And for in the winter time regarding 417, there's no additional shadow being cast on the rear of their property. There is, however, to note shadows being cast into the rear yards of the properties along U Street in the winter, in sort of the afternoon season.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Those were all of my questions. Thank you, Patrick.
Mm-hmm. Joel, I heard you wanted to chime in. I haven't heard you say anything. You have any questions?
Well, one I wanted to go back
He
to.
needed me to warm up the crowd before he was willing to come on stage.
I just like to let everybody else have their say because As I've been accused of being opinionated.
Nah, not you.
No, not at all. Question, is this the 60% for the IZs is for rental? So is this whole building going to be rental, or is it going to be condos with rentals in it?
Building will all be rentals.
So the whole building is going to be rentals. Who's going to be the owner of the building?
Who's going to be the owner? Our company will be the owner of the building. All developers.
Okay. I have other questions for Marty. If he's still here.
I'm here.
Okay.
Emily should
Marty,
take it off the screen so the people come back.
yeah, it'd be nice to see people rather than that. Okay,
Yeah.
hey, great. Marty's hiding from us, of course. No. You can't get away from me, Marty. You know that. The IZ regulations and the RF1. The reason there's only one ever been done is because it's simply unaffordable, and it's structured that way, that they didn't want people building an RF1. Normal IZ of 10 units above is like what, 6-7%? In RF1 with this 2-4-6-8, you're either 25% at a minimum or 33% IZ, which is unaffordable. You know, that's why, oh, excuse me, that's why IZ units aren't built in RF1. The way the zoning is defined, it's virtually impossible to do it. So the fact that you're saying, okay, you have 4, hey, wonderful, but it's RF1's not designed or amenable to doing that. That's more of a statement.
Is that a question?
I do have
an opinion on that.
That was more of a statement, is because you're making a big deal of 4 IZ units that there were never any others provided. It's because
I
the
guess
RF1
I would, if I could just address that
to provide that
issue. That's an opinion. I don't think that the zoning commission intentionally put an IZ component in there in order to make sure that nobody actually ever developed a 4th unit.
Well, they did it unintentionally by not thinking about when people are complaining in larger units when they only require 6 or 7% of the square footage to be IZ, when in the RF4 what they're really requiring is 25 to 33% of the footage. Yeah,
it's a big number, and I think they maybe overestimated what the draw of converting in the RF zone. And if they really wanted to encourage IZ development, they might have moderated that a little bit.
Right.
Because it's very rare. And in other neighborhoods, in some other neighborhoods where the market value is not that high, I've had some clients get closer to entertaining the idea, although in those neighborhoods, there's not a lot of RF zones either. So I was just mentioning that I think the BZA and the zoning commission is going to be kind of excited about it, because they thought people were going to be doing this more often, and they seem a little frustrated that people aren't. But I understand why they're not, believe me.
Right. Okay, so back to
Well, Joel,
BZA
before you ask your second point, I just want to clarify, are you skeptical that this project can pull off that many units and be viable?
Well, I'm skeptical on the number of units, number one. If they think they could make 11 work, more power to them. But I mean, it's not structured that that's a way to do it. And I'd be curious to see which units they're gonna designate as IZ. And I'll bet they're the basement units and the smallest units in there.
I would love to know the answer to that question too.
I can, you want to speak to that, Emily?
I was going to say, we have the IZ units called out specifically on the plans, if you'd like me to go through that.
Could we take a
we
moment
weren't
to look
provided
at
with
it?
plans or anything, so.
Sure. So I want to, actually, it looks like, Chris, on this one, we didn't call them out specifically. I know you wrote the numbers down, though, of which units they were.
Yeah, I was going to say they're not on the diagrams you sent me that I sent to the committee because I
Yeah,
had.
I apologize. We originally did have it noted out in here. So I
Yeah,
apologize
so
on that.
We'll just start at the basement and walk up.
Okay.
So units, I believe 6, 5, 6, 2, and 7.
So the first 3 units noted were all on the first floor. And for unit 2, unit 5, unit 6, and unit 7, you said?
Correct.
Is on the second floor.
So in other words, all 1 bedrooms.
They are all 1 bedrooms.
About 700 square feet if I'm, as you're flipping through here, trying to catch numbers.
The 2 back here are 1730, 665. This one is a 2-story unit, is a 1 bedroom at 968. And unit 7 is also a 1 bedroom at about 650 square feet.
So all the smaller ones, and all the others are 1100 and change. 1300 there's one. Yeah, which, you know, is okay. That's the way you're going to do. That's how you get them to work. Make them the smallest units and make the other ones bigger.
And
So,
there are other units that size in the cellar level, but obviously we're not using those. But there are additional 1 bedroom units that are not being utilized towards IZ. So.
And so the 1 unit that is in the cellar is actually 2 levels. So they're on the first and the cellar level.
Yes, unit 2 is on the first and cellar level.
Okay, thanks.
okay, so back to Marty and the VA, what they like and they don't like. You still with me, Marty?
I'm here.
Okay. All the experience I've had with BZA is they have a firewall at 900 square feet. Have you ever come across the case where they've made any variance to that?
Yes, admittedly, it's not the easiest variance for them to approve.
I mean, I had a case where it was a trapezoidal square, 50% of the lots by right could do a 3rd unit. We were 150 square feet shy of a 3rd unit and they denied it. And here you're asking for 3 extra units that you don't have the square footage for. I mean, I don't see BZA approving it. And it's, you know, compared to everything else on this area in LaJoy Park, it's really overdeveloping the lot. I mean, that's just blunt, opinionated me.
And I hear you. And I guess my response to that would be, well, nobody has asked for this yet since the special exception was instituted 5 years ago. There were instances of variance relief. There were instances of variance relief from the 900-foot rule prior to the change in 2015. They did get a little tougher.
My ask was just 2 years ago.
Okay, so
under the
a lot
2016
depends.
regs. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, a lot depends on the situation. Of course, I've seen people ask for it, like the one that was denied a couple months ago on Harvard Street. It was a row house in the middle of a block of row houses. There was absolutely nothing unique about it at all. And they wanted 4 units, and they wanted to provide a 2 of them IZ, one IZ and one you know, the 120%. And it took 3 hearings for the board to deny it because they wanted to find some way to approve it because of the low income aspect to it.
But how shy were they on the 900?
Oh, they were well shy of it. They didn't have 2,700 even. I think they had like 2,400 square feet. So, but the answer to your question, we think this one's unique. We think, I hear you. It's not, you know, a slam dunk by any means regarding the variance. It's kind of nuanced, and I think it's a unique case for them. I'll be interested to see what they think about it. I know it's kind of a subjective analysis when it comes to that. So, but I think I agree. There's been cases where there were 30 feet short of 2,700 square feet. But if every property on that block was also 30 feet short, it would be impossible to grant that variance because there's no uniqueness, no exceptional condition. And we're asserting that we do have an exceptional condition here, and we'll see what the board says, I guess.
So specifically, what is that exceptional condition?
Well, it's basically the challenge of restoring and redeveloping a large building on an exceptionally large lot in a way that is economically feasible. And part of that goes to not building units that are too large. We think 40%, 41% lot occupancy is the right, and Chris, feel free to jump in, is the right number, and that's what HPRB will approve, we think. And that's what they've suggested they're comfortable with. So at that type of massing, we could do 7 units and the units would be much larger. And we think that could end up being more dense than doing 11 units, because the 7 units being larger might be 4 bedrooms, might lend themselves to group houses or student housing as opposed to what the market bears. And so in that sense, the difference between 8 and 11, we don't think is a huge difference, because we're still talking about the same amount of actual massing and density and bedrooms.
But you're aware going the other way as well, on the corner of T and 3rd and then mid block, on the 400 block of T, single family houses, the original houses were redeveloped as kept as single family as well.
And definitely want to have that answer to that question, Joel, but just want to say if we have any specific committee matters that we can address just in the next couple minutes, I definitely want to get to some of the attendee questions as well, but thank you,
Yeah, no, I was just pointing out that there are other alternative ways to have done it, and it has been done as, these houses were done as single family units as well, and there's a market for that as well. That's
Amanda, do we have a time constraint? I wasn't aware of one.
Right now, no.
There is no time constraint.
Okay.
No, we're not holding to anything. Everyone that wants to question is going to get a chance to do that, since we're online and we don't have to move out of anywhere.
Good. Joel, I sort of lost the thread at the beginning, and then I think I picked it back up, but I just want to understand, you said firewall at the beginning. You were not talking about a literal firewall, right? You were talking about a metaphorical one?
Metaphorical.
Okay, that is very helpful.
BZA has, from every case I've gone through, seen, and like Marty said, it's very difficult for them to exempt the 900 square feet.
They have actually done some with 3 units, but not on an 11 unit property.
Yeah,
we have had with 3 units where they've, but they've been an exception, and I only know 2 that I can think of off the top of my head. I also just want to take a chance, now that he's here, to let Dan Winston, who is our ANC commissioner on the committee, introduce himself, since this is his first time here too, and he was on a little later.
Hi everybody, I'm Commissioner Dan Winston, just Dan from 1B12. I live near 14th and U. Formerly was chair of the Transportation Committee, and I'm very excited to chair this wonderful committee alongside Patrick, and am here to listen and to learn. I care deeply about these issues, and I'm so glad to see such a great turnout of people on such an important topic. This is an unusual time, but I think the attendance here and the quality of discussion shows that these kinds of meetings, maybe they can't replace the in-person gatherings, but they definitely can do a good job of trying to keep our community connected.
Did I miss the memo that there's going to be co-chairs?
No, we're supposed to have a co-chair. We did have a co-chair before. That's what Dan Orlinsky was, but he's moved on to a different committee, and now Dan Winston has stepped up to take his place.
Got it.
I was moved from transportation to here, and so I'm very, very excited. Look forward to meeting you all in person sometime, but let me not take time from the discussion. Thanks for acknowledging me, Patrick.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So are there any other questions that the committee members have that they want to address directly to the team?
Yes, Tony.
Go ahead, Tony.
I didn't see any, maybe I overlooked the comments. Was there comments from the zoning office, the zoning administrator, or the
it would be the planning office.
Staff? I'm sorry, Office of Planning?
Yes.
They haven't weighed in yet, the Office of Planning, and I don't think we even know who was assigned to review it. So we haven't had any new discussions with them yet.
What about the historic preservation staff?
Brendan Meyer.
Yeah, we've been working extensively with Brendan Meyer on this project. We've probably had, I think, 2 or 3 rounds of iterations and looking at the massing, exterior materials, window placements, proportion, all of that stuff. So we've been working with them extensively.
Just to clarify, we're going to be having a separate discussion regarding historic after the zoning.
Unless you have specifics that you want, this is your opportunity to ask them. Emily.
Gotcha. So it's not going to be separated.
Yeah, we're not, as I explained when we started, I don't
Gotcha.
separate this because it's all one project, and rather than go through one whole area and then start talking and then get into the community and then have to come back.
Right. That's perfect.
Trying to speed up, not having to have overlap.
So I'm going to direct this to Emily and Ron. Question basically in terms of dealing with Brandon. I full disclosure, I was several years ago architect of one of these houses that was originally a single family house on the corner of 3rd and U Street, turned into a rooming house in the 40s, and we transformed it back into a single family house of the same size and scale, maybe a little bit smaller. But in terms of, and I worked with Brandon extensively with this neighborhood, in terms of the massing and the scale, what were his main comments regarding the massing and scale of the new addition, how it relates to the existing original building?
So, I mean, we've had a lot of positive feedback with him. I think the key elements that Historic was really focused on was to make sure we're maintaining that same pitch and alignment with the roof planes of the original structure, carrying over materials that are similar or in line with the historic structure. He was in favor of the differentiation between the 2 bricks, so that there is still some delineation between the original structure and the addition. But based on what we've presented, we're under the understanding that they'd support the subdivision of the lots as we're showing it.
Okay, I was a little confused, or not necessarily confused, but because I know working with historic in this neighborhood and with other historic structures, they tend to like additions to be obviously compatible with the existing, with materiality and things like that. But maybe it's my opinion, it just seems that this addition is almost competing with the original historic building in terms of scale and in terms of, for lack of a better word, busyness. Where I understand the idea of incorporating bays and sort of modern interpretations, but it seems like for this neighborhood where James McGill's, one of his best intentions was to have park-like settings, that there were no fences in between. That's a whole nother story and history about how a fence went up in LaDroit Park for other issues, but park-like settings and air and light because I think when it was built, it was technically a little suburb right outside the city limits. And I know a lot of people to this day who've worked with historic have had to keep diminutive additions or no additions. I know they were strict about fence sizes. And it just seems that this addition is not within that same historic spirit. So I was just a little confused why Brandon would be so supportive of something so large and so sort of the antithesis of what this neighborhood was about historically.
So, I mean, in terms of the size, I think if I may go back to those sections again, just to share the screen real quick. The addition itself really isn't that large. I know it kind of appears larger just along the west elevation, because a majority of that elevation is actually wrapping the existing structure. The addition itself is pretty minimal in size in comparison to the original length of the building. And in terms of the forms, I guess, going through from the perspective settings, or at least starting with the partie, when we've been working with Brendan, his main focus has really been carrying across this roof line and carrying across this roof plane. We had originally had an option where we had shown like breaking up that facade with the dormer passing through that plane, and he was very adamant that we should maintain that plane and have that separation. They were actually even in favor of a little bit more randomized window pattern than what we're showing, because additions a lot of the times, especially along the rear, don't have as much uniformity or placement for the windows. It's more of a reflection on what's in the interior as opposed to the overall exterior aesthetic. We were trying to, sort of be in more repose. I think making sure that this massing had a projection, and we also wanted to ensure the proposed addition did as well, as a way to create a delineation or breaking up that elevation, especially along 5th Street, because it is the most visible. And the areas that we were given sort of an intention or allowed expression that was perhaps a little bit more varied were the ones or the views that are facing towards the alley. But there wasn't really a strong opposition of carrying over this gabled roof form from the original building and sort of playing off of that plane.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yep.
If I can just jump in with, if Bill is finished.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't made any HPRB comments because, I mean, I have an issue with the number of units. I think the reduced number of units would reduce the addition, but I agree entirely with Bill. I think it is very overscaled for an addition on this house, where especially it's one of the few single family McGill houses left, and you really are, you say it's diminutive. It is, even if it's 80% of what it is, it's connected, and it's very, very big addition.
Joel, when you say it's one of the last single family McGill houses left,
well,
what does that mean exactly?
That hasn't been renovated.
That hasn't been renovated. Okay, thanks. But it does technically have 3 different units in it, whether or not they have
they were illegal
of occupancy.
They were illegal, yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, so at this point, I will give Ms. Norman, who is the SMD member, a chance to weigh in if she has any comments before we turn it out loose to the community at large.
I do not have any comments at this time, but I thank everybody for coming onto the Zoom to give your input. This is an important issue in our community, and we have several members who live on U Street and on T Street who have strong opinions about this development, and I'm here to learn and support and to assist any way I can.
Okay, so since we have no more questions that relate directly to the project from our committee, I will turn it over to Amanda, who will now take questions from the community. And please, let me just say this, please ask questions and try not to get on a quote unquote soapbox. I understand there are some very heated feelings on this project, but we're not gonna make anything come out by debating this issue in phenomenal, or whatever that word is. At this point, we need to have real questions and concerns, and I know there probably will be some repetition, but please just be as succinct as possible so that we can get everybody in. Thank you.